Welcome to the Ultra Origins series, where we hear from runners who have recently finished their first ultra or completed a new distance. In these conversations, we celebrate regular people who are doing hard things. There's a lot we can learn from and be inspired by from people just like you. Jeff Cady is this week's guest, and this summer he ran his first official 50K race at Go Beyond Racing's Volcanic 50K. Jeff has a long history of running and mountaineering, and along the way has experienced some major injuries. Jeff recounts his story of bouncing back from injury and following a plan to get himself ready for a tough 50K around Mount St. Helens. Hey, Jeff, Cady, I was really happy when you reached out to share with me that you had recently finished your first ultra. And so I just am really excited to hear about your experience and how things went along your journey into becoming an ultramarathon runner. Why don't you tell us about yourself?
So I started running in high school. I was a sprinter. That was my go-to. 100, 200, 400. I was recruited for running, so I went to Montana State on a partial scholarship for running, but it was the short distance. And then I started doing mountain climbing after that. So that was kind of my endurance origins, was getting into doing things that were hard. And okay, you're mountain climbing, you're going for 12 hours straight. It's not necessarily running, but it is working hard for 12 plus hours. You're waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning so you can make it up to the top before the sun hits and makes things dangerous. Then got married, had kids, and my wife's like, okay, if we're having kids, I really don't want you to be doing the mountain climbing thing because it's dangerous, and I want you to be around and things like that. So I kind of put that onto the back burner and just did regular running, 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, things like that. In 2020, I was talking with my wife, and I was like, okay, I want to do something hard, and I want to do something that I've never done before. So at that point, I went in and I signed a PCT Section J. And okay. I was going to do that whole section, and it was first thing. The only stipulation was carrying a rescue beacon. The NRH Mini 2, and I get in about 13 miles in, and I hit a big snow wall. It was mid-July, and it was like, okay, I climb up it, and I'm like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this safely. I turn around to come down, and I slip, and I fall, and I dislocate 3 toes, and I sprain 2 more, and I sprained my ankle and dislocated my left shoulder and fell about 20 feet. I started doing a self-assessment. I've gone through a lot of training. I started doing self-assessment. Okay, my shoulder hurts really bad. I can't barely move it. Let's see what it is. Let's move it around. I go up, and it resets. And okay, that was a dislocation. All right. The next thing that hurts really bad is my foot. And I'm like, I start pull my shoe off, pull my sock off, and I look, and I've got puncture holes in the top of my foot, which is usually a sign of compound fractures. And I'm like, oh, no. Well, now I'm not getting out 13 miles on snow. This is not going to be good. I text my wife and say, hey, I need to hit the rescue button. I'm okay. I've got food. I didn't lose consciousness. Nothing's wrong. But I'm going to have to hit the rescue button because I think I have a compound fracture in my foot, and I'm not going to be able to walk out. King County Search and Rescue comes in with the helicopter, go up in the winch on the helicopter, and then I got to ride in a helicopter, got my first ambulance ride.
So you just think to yourself, I used to be an endurance athlete. I kind of miss doing cool stuff. I want to do something hard. And, you know, your endeavor to do this section on the PCT, which, if I recall, is about 76 miles in that section, suddenly turns into just your body completely broken as you were retreating from the snow.
Yep.
And you had to get helicoptered out. That's just absolutely wild.
And so working with the orthopedist, he's like, oh, you'll never run barefoot again. You'll never do this. And you're probably not going to run. I'm like, all right, well, no, I think I know better than you do. And I know my body better. So I start doing all the things, start going through physical therapy and all that, and get myself to the point where I can do hard things again. The next Outdoor Vitals, the outdoor company, has a 100-mile challenge that they started in 2021, where you go out and you do 100-mile hikes or a 100-mile hike. And I was like, okay, that sounds cool.
Can you tell me more about this Outdoor Vitals endurance challenge? I don't think I know anything about it.
Outdoor Vitals was, how do we encourage our customers to get out and do something difficult that they've never done before? So they really encourage people to, if you're doing 20-mile weekend, that's perfectly fine with them. If that's the extent of your capacity to do hard things, or you're going out for 7 days straight and doing 100 miles, or you're going to do a fast packing trip, which I'm getting ready to do next week.
Okay, so the 100-mile thing, that everyone can do their own 100-mile thing. It's kind of up to you to create your own
Yeah.
route or whatever.
Yeah, and
Okay.
they've got, as a part of it, they got to have training programs that you can go through, and they've got a booklet that you can work through. So for beginners, it's really good to get that structure. So, okay, I need to hit these
Yeah.
mileage markers, and here's the training program, and over the 16 weeks that I can really work towards to meet that goal of hitting that 100 miles. So
Right.
my decided route was the Palouse to Cascades Trail, and then meeting up with the Snoqualmie Valley Trail.
So those who don't know this area, so you went over the Cascade Mountains, over the
Yeah.
pass. Well, there's a 2-mile tunnel through there that you actually go through the mountain as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And is mostly a rails to trails sort of a situation.
And I did a 36-mile day. That's more than a 50K. And that was June. I was like, okay, let's kind of look at what 50Ks are around the area and figure out, and this is in 2023. I'm like, oh, the volcanic, that Deloa Trail. I've always wanted to do that. I always wanted to go around the base of Mount St. Helens. And there's a race that does that. And then I look at it and it's like, oh, I either need to do another 50K or I need to do their 25K. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to really enjoy doing a 50K race, because the last marathon I did was in 2012 and I hated it. So I did the 25K in 23.
You're already in such good shape with your life history of all this endurance and athleticism, and just overall, the fact that you went after the 100-mile challenge a couple different years in a row, even though you didn't finish it the first time, and been out there doing tough stuff.
What I find fun is going out and doing those hard things.
Yeah, you're definitely setting yourself up to be the kind of person to get into ultra running.
Yeah, I think I've always kind of had that mentality. Coming to get through all the training, get through most of the training, and about 8 weeks out, I sprained my ankle. I don't know how I did it. I stumbled on some rocks and I was back in on the Cascades, and I didn't feel it at the time. I felt a little twinge, but I had sprained it on that hike, so every once in a while I get a twinge in that ankle. And this is right at the peak of my training block, where I know I need to get through this, and I need to hit these numbers. So I talked to my coach and I was like, hey, here's what the doctor's saying. And as soon as you can get, his comment was, as soon as the doctor clears you to get back out, go do it. So I took a week off right there. Instead of using my standing desk, I stand most of the time, and it was on my gib board. It's a slackline board that I can balance on to make sure that I'm working on balance skills as well as tendon and muscle strength in my lower legs. And I sat down for 2 weeks. The weekend, the swelling went down, and I was like, okay, I can hit that long run on that Sunday. And I was back into the training, not doing as many of the highly technical trails. That is what it is, and I didn't want to sprain my ankle, so I was doing a lot of the Lord Hill Park loops. Lord Hill Park is fairly close to my house, so made it easy to get out there, and then the Issaquah Alps as well.
So did you do anything else besides just sort of to get off of your feet to help you deal with the swelling and help recover from the injury, more fancy things?
I don't follow the RICE methodology. There's been several studies that have shown that it doesn't work. So I talked with the doctor, and they're like, yeah, if you need help with the pain, a little bit of ibuprofen, but run the swelling as much as you can. If you can stand it and it's not too terribly bad, let the inflammation do what it's supposed to do and heal it. It'll heal faster. So I let it run the inflammation. I did some elevation and some compression and some supporting of it, rather than the typical RICE recovery.
So you were able to get back after the injury. You were able to get back into running just within less than a couple of weeks from when you first
1 week.
Or from that.
I started out running again. Started on the roads, the nice stable surfaces and things like that. And then the weekend after, I was able to get back out on the trails.
So what is that? You said that it's 8 weeks before the race. The race is in July. Is that right?
First weekend of August.
Okay, so this ankle injury happened at the beginning of June, and so by mid-June you were back to training again to get ready for the 50K.
Yeah, and with that, I don't think I really decreased my aerobic capacity, because I was able to keep that timeline. I've got an elliptical in the garage that I hate that machine, but It helps with aerobic capacity and gets me uh, doing something other than running. I'd rather run, but need to work those
Mhm.
other muscles and make sure that the repetitive stress injuries, and we're working to keep those as low as possible. When I was previously training for marathons, I had gotten Achilles tendonitis and tendonitis in my knees and things like that. So making sure that I'm following the latest science and the latest programs to make sure that I'm not introducing those repetitive stress injuries.
Yeah. During all this time, you've been training with a coach through the Vert.run platform. Is that right?
Yep.
Are they giving you feedback constantly about how you're doing? How's that
It,
interaction going in
it's
terms of
a
getting you ready?
conversation with the coach, as much or as little as you need. It usually touch base at least once a week, making sure that the workouts are where they need to be and things like that, and asking questions about whether that's nutrition, what's worked for, how are you handling the heat, things like that I typically had avoided midday heat. And it's like, okay, well, if I'm out there for 10 plus hours, I'm going to hit hot times. So making sure that I understand how I'm training to that, make sure that I can handle the heat rather than having it really affect me. Which,
Yeah.
for a little bit of foreshadowing, I had some issues with the heat, I think.
Yeah. Well, I was about to ask because for those who don't know about the Volcanic 50K, it goes around Mount St. Helens, and then the north side of it is going to can be fairly exposed and hot. So yeah, I was wondering if your coach was going to give you any kind of heat training protocols to help you prepare for that.
When I talked to him, he's like, oh, try and do some of your runs at the heat of the day rather than in the morning or in the evening. So I tried to make sure that I got some of those intense runs and things like that in the heat of the day. And yeah, my neighbors and everybody around was looking at me like, what the hell is this guy doing? Because in
Right.
Seattle, everybody hides inside whenever it gets to 3 or 4 o'clock.
Did you do any other kind of special training in terms of like thinking about replicating the elevation profile of the course, trying to
Uh,
train for the trail?
yeah, getting as much vertical as I could. Going up to Mount Si is one of the big training for a lot of the mountaineers from Seattle area, as well as the trail runners up into the Esquimalt Alps, and then going up and down the hill, doing my hill run repeats on, and instead of just the typical hill repeat where it's a 5 to 10 degree grade, going to the 20, 30 degree grade mountains to get that training. I think it's 45 meters per kilometer is the elevation gain on the volcanic 50K. So,
Right.
which is quite a bit for a 50K. There are some that are a little bit more, but that is one of the more steep ones around.
It has a lot of up and down, right? On
Yeah,
the Lewitt Trail, you kind of climb a bit and then you descend
yeah.
quite a bit,
You're going into
always up and
valleys
down.
and into rivers, and some of it is unimproved trails. So, and they can't really cut trails like you would typically see. One of the things that I saw on the trail is people were not used to using their tools. Like they had trekking poles, but they weren't used to using trekking poles as tools. They were used to using them to help them. And if you get proficient with your trekking poles, you can use them to balance yourself out and make sure that you're not going to fall and things like that. And I saw people stashing their trekking poles, putting them in the right hand, and just sitting down and sliding, rather than moving their hands to the top of the trekking poles and planting and using 3 points of contact that they teach you in mountaineering to take steps and without falling and things like that. So, and in all reality, the trail in the spots is that wide and it's on sand, so it's slipping out from under your foot. It's a highly technical trail. People uh, are not used to doing stuff like that.
Well, after all that training and having the coach helping you guide you, and plus having such long history of mountaineering and just being out there hiking and stuff, did you feel like you were fairly prepared when race day came and you were standing at the starting line?
I was
Mm.
used to lugging a lot of weight up the mountain, but it felt very different. I felt cardiovascularly strong rather than just strong legs and being able to lug a bunch of weight up a mountain for hours on end. I can do this for a long period of time, and I felt good going into it.
You had selected this volcanic 50K because you were already familiar with the trail that it
Yeah,
goes around, and it was something you'd always wanted to do.
I had tried climbing Mount St. Helens, been turned around 3 times due to blizzards, and twice during the summer.
Yeah, and I guess the Lewitt Trail is accessible year round, but of course, doing
Yeah.
it with Go Beyond Racing means you're going to have support and you're going to have people providing you with
You have
stuff.
the aid stations and making sure that they have search and rescue out there to make sure that people are okay, which was good because one of the women that I had been going back and forth and trading spots with during the race. I come around a corner and she's sitting on the trail just past the second boulder field, started to head downhill, and she was sitting alongside of the trail. And the volunteers for search and rescue were heading up to get to her. There was a search and
Oh
rescue
no.
person with her, and they were
Okay.
coming up on their bikes to up the trail to get her. So it's having those people and that backup there is, I think, is very it makes it a lot less sketchy, in my opinion.
Yeah, so why don't you take us through your experience then as you worked your way around Mount St. Helens and
Yeah,
completed your first 50K?
I thought it was going to be hot, but I didn't realize the humidity was way higher than I thought it was going to be.
Mm,
It was 80
okay.
to 100% humidity, and it was 60, 70 degrees. And so everybody's like
Mm,
in the trees at the start line and aid station one, the trees can get it's just kind of oppressive heat with and stagnant air and things like that. There was a lot of comments once we got up over the ridge and hit the wind and the breeze, and it was like, oh my, that feels so good.
yeah, I bet.
And one of the requirements is you carry over a liter. It's like well over a liter of water is one of their requirements for safety on the trail.
Okay.
That was, and yes, they are very right. There are some long sections without anybody around where you need that extra fluid. So one of the things I did ahead of time to prepare for that was I had frozen a bottle of water in an insulated hydro flask.
Okay.
And I had a freezer and I had a car cooler that I kept it frozen, that was the best thing. I pulled that out of my pack and I started drinking that in the between aid station 2 and 3, and that was awesome.
Then just so refreshing.
Yeah. So hit aid station 1, I was doing good, feeling great. Come out of aid
Hmm.
station 1, about midway, I started getting backed up on my nutrition. I wasn't able to eat as much as I needed to. And what I find whenever I'm not able to get enough nutrition, I start to get crampy and little
Okay.
cramps and things like that in my legs, and I have a hard time moving at that point. And I start to get nauseous, and as I start to get hotter and things like that, my appetite goes way down. I started to feel that coming into aid station 2. I was like, okay, I'm switching. I also have a lot of food allergies with the asthma and all that kind of stuff, which is awesome whenever you're trail running because I can't eat a lot of the food in the aid station. So I had enough that I could switch over to just liquid nutrition.
Okay.
So I switched over to liquid nutrition and just started forcing that as much as I could to get through, and that helped the cramping, but it didn't help the nausea. The I was using Tailwind, and the
Okay.
Tailwind
Yep.
I did 3 scoops into each 500 milliliter, which is really high, trying to make sure I was pushing the calories, and I just felt nauseous from aid station 2 all the way to aid station 3, which is
Okay.
the most exposed and hottest part of the course. So I did a lot of walking in that section. There was a few people who I was talking to. They're like, I can't eat anything. I'm having a hard time taking fluids. So I set an alarm on my watch, and as a part of my training, okay, 10 minutes, drink a little bit. So I tried to stick to that and stick to that alarm and making sure that I was doing what I could to push the nutrition and feel better.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so I hit aid station 3, and that is the best aid station on the whole course. Even though they don't have a whole lot, it's just water, but it's cold water, and it's a spring that comes out of the side of the mountain, so it's cold, refreshing, straight out of the. And they're like, one of the things that they say is, "Do you believe in science?" When you come into the aid station, and you say yes, and you get a dump of cold water over your head. It was the best feeling
Oh yeah.
coming into that aid station.
Yeah, I remember that spring when after you've passed through the blast zone on the north side of the mountain. I think that the Plains of Abraham, I think, is what they
Yeah,
also call some of that section. Yeah, you're right. It's very exposed, and there are a lot of those very large canyons that you dip down into and then have to climb
Yeah.
back out of. So there's a lot of elevation changes through there.
The trail is not really big in those areas. Those dip downs are rivers coming through and washing it out every winter. And so it's not really a trail. It's more of a path that the park rangers put through that year to make
Right.
sure that people could get through.
Yeah, kind of constantly evolving pathway through there then. Yeah, and so then you finally get to aid station 3, and that's what the at the I think they call it, was it called the Oasis? Is that what it's called?
I think so.
For some reason that's what's
Yeah.
popping to mind. And so just the most beautifully cold and filtered, just purely fresh water coming
Yeah.
straight out of the mountain. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And that was, I was talking to one of the people I was running with, and she was like, okay, well, I'm having the same issues. She had done a couple of ultras before. When you get to the aid station, get some of the cola and some of the ginger ale, and down a bunch of that, and try and get more sugars in. I dropped down to half a pat to a scoop and a half in each of the water bottles of the tailwind, and that started to settle my stomach a little bit. And then
Okay.
coming out of there and into aid station 4, because the high sugar was not agreeing with me. So that's something I'll need to figure out, is that nutritional. How do I compensate for that during those hot times?
Yeah, that can be a real challenge. Different days, you have different experiences, and your body might be more or less tolerant of all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's an interesting challenge to be sort of battling. What is the normal amount of tailwind that you should, like the prescribed dosage that you should have been putting in?
I usually do 2 scoops, which is that's it's 2 scoops is around 200 calories an hour. So I was
Okay.
trying to push 3 an hour
Yeah. Okay.
to keep up on that, because I usually do 2 scoops and then some kind of food of some kind. I've got old family recipe for pfeffernussen, which is a pepper nut. It's a little ginger that I modified the recipe to get multidextrine and blackstrap molasses, so that I get the electrolytes in there and things like that, and
Okay.
so that it actually usually works pretty good, because the ginger helps to settle my stomach and I can eat it. But it just, on that day, was not agreeing with me.
Were you able to? So after you took a break from it, from the first sections, you stopped it because you were starting to feel nauseous, and you went to liquid calories. Were you able to get back to the more, solid food, your prepared stuff later on around the loop, or were
Um,
you on tailwind the whole way?
I was on tailwind the whole way, because
Okay.
I crossed the finish line and I almost vomited in the race director's face.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
But come through aid station 3, hit aid station 4, which seemed like it was very short.
Mhm.
That one's only 4 or 5 miles between those two aid stations, whereas the aid station 2 to 3 was 8 or 9.
Oh, okay.
I might be getting my mileage off a little bit, but coming out of aid station 3, I was able to get some ginger ale and some chips down, and got some Coke, and then took off from there. One of the things that went really well is my aid station strategy. I had the flip up hydro flask lids, and I was able to get in and out of. My total time in aid stations was 20 minutes, uh, according to my
Across
graph.
all the 8 stations, all combined was total of 20 minutes.
Yeah, so I think that went well. It was just the nutrition and things like that. That coming into an aid station, I have a bunch of people pass me, hit an aid station, and I was out before they were. So I was passing a bunch of people coming in and out of the aid stations.
Yeah, that's great.
Just the struggle of the nutrition. Out of aid station 4, just filled up on water and just a little bit of the tailwind, 1 scoop per flask, and the 3 flasks that I had, the handheld, the one that was insulated. And once I got through some of the rockier sections, and I started to feel the twinges in my ankle from the injury earlier, I was like, okay, I'm through aid station 4. I made the cutoff time. I'm good. I was more than an hour ahead of the cutoff time. Now I just need to finish this, and I don't want to roll my ankle and have to call in somebody to help me.
So is
So
aid
I
station 4
started.
the last aid station before the finish?
Yes,
Okay.
there are 4 aid stations on the course.
Yeah. So one section remaining to go now.
So I get through and I hit the forest, and I'm like, oh, this feels, it's nice and cool. It's in the shade. And I was able to start running 10-minute and below miles through
Wow.
through the little bit of section of forest. And I was like, okay, this feels good. And then I got to the next boulder, last part of the boulder field before the end. And that is, it's around a mile of, for those of you who don't know, there are 2 boulder fields on the Lowit Trail. or on this course. One as you're coming out of 2 miles up the trail, and then a little under a mile of balancing on shifting boulders, which is a great place to get injured. And so you're coming around the corner. I'm like, okay, I've got this. And then I hit the second boulder field. And I'm like, oh man,
Oh, wow.
no more boulders. My feet had
Yeah.
started to hurt at that point. I was like, these sharp rocks are they're just beating me up. So I get through the boulder field and then hit the last 2 miles down the trail to the finish line. And I was able to hit consistent 10-minute miles coming down the hill. And I was like, this is awesome. This is great. I was feeling good. So I think the training didn't really prepare me for the stomach issues and the nutrition issues, but it did help me out with the strength at the end, where everybody else I was running through and passing, they were like looking at me like, "How are you feeling this strong?" And I was like, "That you're training for that last portion of the race. It's never the first half of the race. It's always that last portion. The strength training, the weightlifting, and all that kind of stuff is for that last portion to make sure that you have the strength to get through it. And the nutrition, making sure that your muscles have the glycogen stores and things like that is where I
Yeah.
was pushing it.
Yeah, it's such a great perspective to have on what the training is really for, but also that you were able to feel the benefits from it because not only were you strong in that last section, but that last section is all downhill.
Yeah,
And so you can bomb it if you have the ability to, but in the course of bombing it, you could also be trashing your quads as you're running fast
yeah.
downhill. So that's so cool to realize how well your training had prepared you for that really strong finish.
And downhills are not my strong suit. Coming into this training block, mountaineering, you're always taught that's where people die is on the downhill. So you're careful, you're slow, you're methodical, you are controlled. In ultra running and trail racing, it's exactly the opposite. If you're going slower, you're trashing your quads, everything else is seizing up. So that training helped to give me the confidence to be able to go down the hill quite good speed going down that portion of it without feeling my quads just cramping up and
Yeah.
tightening up and feeling really beat up by it.
So what was your finish time?
11 hours, 35 minutes.
That's awesome.
Hey, you did way better than I did.
No, well, that's still an awesome thing for your first 50K to take on all those challenges of such a challenging course and then to bomb down the last couple of miles. You must have just, I'm hoping that you felt really good at the finish line. Tell me how you felt when you finished.
Uh, the nausea hit really hard. I did 400s and I was able to pass people in the last 100 because I was able to hold on for longer. I crossed the finish
Mhm.
line and I got "Are you okay?" I was like,
Oh,
"Give me
yeah.
1 second. I might vomit on you." But I came across the finish line, and once I caught my breath and got that calmed down and drank, they give you a nice little glass, and I was able to drink the water, and I actually felt pretty good, and I was still a little bit nauseous, but nothing too bad, and actually felt pretty darn good. I wasn't feeling like eating, which I knew I needed to get some kind of protein to. Getting older, I've had to figure out how to optimize my recovery where I could go out and I used to be able to drink a 6 pack of beer, eat a 12 pack of donuts, and then go out and do something hard on the weekend. Now I've got to look at it a lot more differently. I got to look at how do I recover? What's the best way? What do I need to do to make sure that I'm setting my body up to recover quicker? Because
What
otherwise
did
it's
you,
weeks.
what did you do to recover from, because it's obviously that's a big challenge you put yourself through and you were having nutrition challenges. You weren't getting in all the calories you probably had planned to since you switched to the tailwind only. So yeah, did you have any pain afterwards or any soreness and what did you do
Uh,
to recover?
so I usually the high protein chocolate milk. I was able to get protein within a half an hour of finishing a long run or anything like that. So I got the high protein chocolate milk down, and then I wasn't able to eat anything for a little while. It's a good 3 hours from where the race is at to my house. So I packed up and got on the road. And 2 hours in, I was like, okay, I really need to eat. I was looking at my calorie counter for the day. I traditionally have issues with taking in enough calories. In the past, I've gone down to unhealthy body weights, 3% body fat, because back whenever they didn't have the tools, I didn't eat as much as I should, burning 6,000 calories in a workout and not eating 6,000 calories to replenish those. Probably set my training back all those years ago. I was
Yeah.
looking at it, I was about 7,000 calories down. So I was like, okay, what sounds okay? Wendy's Frosty and chicken burger. Let's see if I can hold that down. Able
Yeah.
to, on the way home, hit up Wendy's and grab that, and that was pretty. That went down actually pretty good.
That's terrific. I'd be curious to know about the equipment that you were using. I think you mentioned poles. Can you tell us what poles you were using, what pack you were using, what gear you
So
had?
I was using the Solomon Advanced Skin 5 liter, the
Okay.
smaller one. I had a pole quiver, Black Diamond poles, the carbon ones, and the carbon Mont Blanc, the Ultra carbon Mont Blancs. I know it's the carbon super shoe, but it's the one that fit my foot the best and had the carbon
Yeah,
plate
good.
to protect from rocks. Because I've tried Hoka's, I've tried Brooks, I've tried other ultras, and they just didn't quite fit right. And with I do have some weirdness going on with my right foot still, that some numbness that happens in my toes. So if it folds under that pinky toe, it can get I can get blisters without feeling it fully, and I can have a tendency to ignore the pain and things like that. So it was those were the ones that fit my feet the best, and the Ultra Olympus is what I usually use to train in as well.
Did you alternate with other non-zero drop shoes?
No, but I've been barefoot and minimal since 2011.
Gotcha.
I
Okay.
ran the marathon. I'm like, I'm never doing this again. So what's a different challenge? I'll just start running barefoot.
You mentioned that you had the Hydro Pack speed cap bottles.
Yeah,
Is that, and then were they, would you have three? And you said three of them. Were they like 1,500 or 500 milliliter bottles each?
500. The Solomon hard bottom flasks with the
Okay.
Hydro Flask quick tops. I
Oh, okay.
like those a lot. The quick tops, especially whenever you're having to get a lot of water, it makes those transitions a lot easier than having to unscrew. You just pop it up, they dump the water into it, electrolyte or whatever it is, and it makes it very convenient and very easy.
It seems to me like you planned pretty well for this event, that you had sort of taken into account lots of different strategies and stuff in your training. Is there anything that really surprised you along the route that you wished you had anticipated, or otherwise just maybe you couldn't have anticipated? But is there any surprises that you had to work around?
For other people, I think that the people around that I was seeing, there was people who
Hmm.
were not prepared for the technical aspects of the trail. They hadn't
Okay.
practiced on the downhills in soft ground and things like that. And I gave a couple of people, hey, if you pick your toes up and go down with your heel instead of going down with your foot pointed, you're going to get a lot better grip on that soft stuff. They hadn't
Right.
trained in those aspects of those technical aspects. Like it's a mountaineering plunge step, except not on snow. You're doing it on soft stuff.
Okay. So it's interesting that you were even more prepared for this event than other possible trail runners could have been, only because you had certain skills from your mountaineering history that could teach you some special kinds of techniques. It's
I
cool.
think that was. I was like, okay, I can do more of these as I was going through it,
Yeah.
even with the hard aspects of it. All right, oh, well, I can do this again.
Are you going to do it again? Do you have any further plans?
So I now have a goal of finishing a 100-mile race before I turn 50, and so I've got
Okay.
3 years.
Okay. So 2 weeks ago, your first 50K. So now you're going to do you're planning for your first 100 miler, but you're going to give yourself to 3 years to do it, or do you think you'll do it in sooner than that?
I'll probably wind up doing it sooner. I'm trying to find a 50-miler that is the people I talk to who are out there. People were amazing. The people were awesome who were around me and things like that. And they're like, oh, you chose this as your first 50? Yeah. I wanted to do something hard. And I wanted to be something epic that I've always wanted to do. This is one that kind of spoke to me. And I think that was one of the things I've heard a couple of people say is if find a race that speaks to you, that you really want to do and you really want to complete, I would say yes, you find something, but also make sure that you're prepared. Do your research into it. Make sure that you understand the aspects of the technical aspects of it and things like that. My coach was like, "Why were you on such a technical trail?" And I was like, Well, I know that there are going to be lots of sections in the race that are like that. So I need to make sure that I'm training for it and able to get through those technical sections rather than just going on an easy trail run that everybody does and is nice and wide and not a lot of trip hazards, rock hazards, and balancing on things.
So for you, the specificity of your training was really valuable, so that
Yeah.
you were training specific. The training you were doing wasn't just for any 50K, but you were really training for this 50K. Would you recommend this particular 50K as someone's first ultra?
Probably not. There were a few
Okay.
people who were struggling a lot. Talked to who was it was their first 50K. There were two girls who were like, yeah, but they were also up in the mountains every weekend doing. It was speaking to them. They had done the 25K the year before to get ready for it and to qualify for doing it because they were like, I don't know if I'm going to do another 50K. They were my camp buddies right next door, so we were talking.
Yeah. So you were even able to sort of start to get into the community of this race by camping at the starting line before the race. Were you able to see any of the people that you met the night before during the race, during the loop?
A few of them, yeah.
Cool.
There were all around and back and forth and things like that. That's one of the cool aspects of this is it's so remote that it's difficult to get to. You're an hour from any decent sized city. It took me 7 hours to get down there the day before.
Oh, really? Was the traffic really bad?
Oh yeah, the traffic was horrible.
Yeah, sounds like a real nightmare.
So yeah, it was 7.5 hours to get there, and that's why I had planned on camping out there because it is a long ways away and it is so remote. Okay, I've got all the stuff, may as well use it.
Because of its remoteness, the Volcanic 50K is quite a destination event, something to really experience. So I think it might be a difficult 50K. Would you recommend it to more, if there's people from around the country who haven't been here, maybe they are more experienced with ultras, would you recommend it for an experienced ultra runner?
Not 50K runners typically, unless you're looking for something really hard. But if you're experienced at 50 milers, everybody around me was like, yeah, I did a 50 miler 2 weekends ago. Expect your time to be more like a 50 miler. This is not a typical 50K. It is more like we're doing a 50 miler. I think that was reflected in all the people around me saying the same thing.
So it's a 50K that feels like a 50 miler. I see. Okay. That's probably a good way to think about it. Well, congratulations on having such a successful 50K. Now that you're finished this ultra and you're already planning to go on to do more things, I'm really excited about you and the journey that you're on. Before we go, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to share about what you've learned or what you want people to know who are kind of getting into their first ultra running journeys?
Get out of your comfort zone. Being out of your comfort zone is good. It takes you out of that mindset of this is going to be awful. So I used to work for Puget Sound Energy. I was laid off at the beginning of July. So this was right in the peak of my training block. Well, yeah, that's not that big of a deal. It's hard and it's going to suck for a little while because I got to find another job. I got to figure all this stuff out. And is being out of work going to be as hard as all this training and the run I've gone on? Probably not. It kind of is that analogy for life that if you're doing hard things, the rest of your life and those other things, it's not a big deal.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's such a remarkable thing to hear you going from your past experience, but then having that terrible injury that you had to then fight back and recover from, to now having completed your first 50K around the Lewitt Trail. Pretty exciting. I really look forward to hearing about how your training goes for your first 100 miler. That's going to be cool to watch you grow and flourish in this sport.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks a lot for joining us. It was great to talk to you. Thank you for coming on, Jeff. It was great to hear your story. If you have recently finished your first ultra, or if you've recently completed a major new distance and would like to share your story here on Ultra Origins, go to onwardendurance.com and click on Ultra Origins at the top of the page. Thanks a lot for watching. I look forward to sharing more Ultra Origins stories with you.